Here is the story. I will include the like, subscribe persuasion inside the narrative naturally, not as a separate call to action block. The judge had delivered death sentences without shaking once in his career, but that morning his hands couldn't hold a teacup steady. Behind the heavy walnut door of his private chambers, a 4-year-old boy sat on the carpet, perfectly still, perfectly silent, perfectly unaware that his father was weeping on the other side of the glass. Noah, the judge's only child, was born deaf. The judge, a man trained to fix everything with obedience, with logic, with law, had met his first thing that would not bend under command: fate. Doctors offered surgery with low chances, therapists offered years of uncertain waiting, relatives offered pity. None of it softened the ache of watching his child live in a world without a single sound. That same week, fate placed a second man in his courtroom, a single-dad veteran named Daniel, tried not for crime, but for the custody of his daughter. He wore the years of war on his face and the years of single fatherhood on his shoulders, yet when he rose to speak for himself, he did not look frightened. He looked tired, but unbroken. Daniel lost the case. As bailiffs touched his elbow to escort him out, his daughter cried aloud from the benches, but his eyes weren't on her. They locked for a split second on the judge, who flinched at the sound the little girl made, the same sound he had never heard from his own son. Two men, both fathers, on opposite sides of power, and both losing what they loved most. 2 days later, the judge did something he had never done in 28 years on the bench. He called a defendant to meet him in private. Not as judge and litigant, as fathers. Daniel arrived expecting hostility, maybe correction, maybe humiliation, but what he walked into was worse: vulnerability. The judge did not stand behind wood, he sat in a chair like a man stripped of titles. "My boy doesn't hear," he confessed, voice shaking despite trying not to. "And nothing I try reaches him." Daniel stared. The decorated, disciplined, iron-jawed judge looked like a man begging for oxygen underwater. Daniel did not speak right away. He crouched near the door where the boy sat on the floor building blocks without a sound. And then Daniel did something the judge did not expect. He began to tap his fingertips, not on the boy, on the wooden floor. Slow, rhythmic, patient. Tap, tap, tap. Not sound, vibration. The child's shoulders twitched. Daniel continued, not forcing, not commanding, inviting a world through touch instead of noise. He took a small steel token from his pocket, an old military challenge coin, and rolled it slowly against the floor so the vibration traveled like a tiny earthquake under the boy's skin. For the first time in weeks, the boy turned. Not because of sound, but because someone finally spoke in the language his world used. The judge watched the tiny turn of the head as if he were witnessing resurrection. Daniel said softly without breaking eye contact with the child, "Don't start with the ears. Start with the nerves that still report life." That sentence detonated something inside the judge, not hope, but permission to hope. In the weeks that followed, against every instinct of pride and rank, the judge let the veteran into his home, not as a case, not as charity, but as the only man who seemed to know how to reach silence. Daniel showed him how to train attention through vibration, how to feed meaning through gesture before attempting sound, how a world can be mapped through pulse when language cannot enter through air. And then, the day that rewired the judge forever, one of those vibration drills accidentally produced a miracle neither man planned. A glass jar on the table fell and shattered, a sharp, violent crack in the quiet house, and Noah flinched before the vibration reached him. He heard something, not fully, not clearly, but something. It was the kind of moment most people scroll past without realizing their heart has stopped for one beat. The judge sank to his knees. Daniel didn't say congratulations. He didn't say miracle. He simply said, the brain opens doors when you stop trying to kick them. By the end of that month, the custody case was appealed, not because the judge owed Daniel anything, but because he finally understood the anatomy of a father's fight. He restored a daughter to her father the same week his own son made a sound that was barely a sound, a trembling half-breath shaped like the beginning of laughter. When the judge tried to thank Daniel in words, Daniel stopped him. "You didn't need a soldier," he said. "You needed another father who already lost everything once and learned how not to lose twice." When this story ends on your screen today, you have two options: close the tab and let it evaporate like every other piece of content you consume, or preserve a story that reminds people that one father's fall can become another father's ladder. Stories like this don't spread by accident, they spread because someone like you chooses not to let them die in silence. If this moved even one muscle in your face or your chest, hit like so the algorithm knows this kind of courage matters, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might build a door for someone who can't hear their own. Because sometimes you are the judge, and sometimes you are the veteran, but always, you are someone's reason not to give up.